Hey, I'm Steve Hoskinson. Welcome to our live broadcast here on YouTube. We're really doing an experiment now and checking to see what kind of offerings that we can make here from organic intelligence. Mostly, I'll start just by sharing some things of interest that I'm looking at now, directions I'm taking, and the reason that I want to share that with you is because just to tell you a little bit about me, that I'm an adjunct faculty at JFK University in the somatic psychology program, and have taught leaders in the field of somatic psychology and have taught trauma therapists. I've trained trauma therapists internationally from Europe and Asia and Middle East, North America, and have done that for over 20 years. And so now I'm beginning to really reconsider all of that traveling, and can travel now just to be with you where you are right now. And we're offering this on our YouTube channel to share this with you. So this is an experiment, so I'll really look forward to your feedback. And I'll, if you can share with me questions that you have or directions, that's really key, because this is the first one, right? This is the first time I'm really beginning to share. Let's see. Hey, boss. Share information for you. And I'll just type in here so I can encourage you to say hello. And all right, there we go. There are so many directions that I could take, and one direction that we have with the End of Trauma course is really the application of these ideas from organic intelligence into one's personal life, and then also then is the coaching and support and teaching and training that I do for therapists, for trauma therapists in particular, and the professional community. And so I'm really wondering sort of how to do that. I do them both, of course. You know, there are articles that I'm looking at and research that I'm reading that are relevant to our own life. And so that's part of my initial thought, my initial direction. That initial direction would be to share some of the research with you and begin to connect the dots. What does dopamine have to do with eating disorders? What does being overweight have to do with the dorsal vagal system? What does the prefrontal cortex and its maturation early for early trauma have to do with orientation? There are all of these dots that I hope to be able to connect for you, and will offer ways to begin to understand the map of how it all fits together. This is what I hear when I'm training people, when I'm training professionals. They're saying, all of these different pieces, now it all fits together. And so if I can offer one thing, it would be that. It would be the way that these things all make sense and the way that they all fit together. We have a really super comprehensive training program, but it's because we have a super comprehensive approach. For my background, I was trained in many traditions. Clinical psychology was one of them. And in the clinical psychology world, that meant that I worked with people who were depressed, who were delusional, who were psychotic, who had anxiety, who were having family issues. And I did play therapy, I did analytic treatment, I did insight-oriented work, cognitive behavioral, and then learned so much from the world of strategic therapy as well. So these traditions that come together here are many, because we have to know many of these traditions in order to work with a complex biology. Thanks. In the future, we can schedule the live meeting so it'll advertise to people We subscribe. That's perfect. Thank you. This is an experiment in so many ways. So thank you for this sharing. We have what we call it like an ISOMA approach, and that ISOMA approach, ISOMA, I'll just type it in here. ISOMA stands for image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. And in the end, what I'm bringing here in organic intelligence is how your system will be self-organizing, how your client systems can be self-organizing. But in order to do that, we have to have a very particular interaction with people, because this it's a bit of related to some of the research I was looking at today. And I mentioned this in an email, if you got an email from me. It's a good time to tell you our website is organicintelligence.org. Here we go. And I was talking about and thinking about in the email, I was talking about apoptosis. Yeah, excuse me for that. Or programmed cell death, or pruning, cellular pruning. And it was this article here, Scientific Reports, Early Life, and this is exactly why I should be talking to you, because I geek out on this stuff, and here's what the title is, and it'll tell you why it needs some translation. Early life and pubertal stress differentially modulate gray matter development and human adolescence. Yep, that's right. Had you been wondering if early life and pubertal stress differentially modulate gray matter development and human adolescence? Well, who hasn't? So the point of this is that that the brains of people under stress during early stress, puberty, and this is relevant because we have the ACEs study that now shows this link between early stress, early trauma, and the way the physiology develops or misdevelops. What is that misdevelopment? Well, in organic intelligence, we treat that misdevelopment. We treat the misdevelopment. So we're not treating the trauma, we treat the misdevelopment. We treat the way that the biology has become skewed by its early history. And it's just a no-brainer in a way that anything that is lasting, anything that is happening for us, any of our stress and anxiety, it's not a psychological problem per se. It's not primarily a psychological problem. In organic intelligence, we are telling and asking therapists to resync your psychology. Resync your psychology is what we say, because we have to stop thinking in terms of neurosis and start thinking in terms of networks. We have to stop thinking in terms of the individual and start thinking about the system, about the way everything works together. And so that's what I hope to do more of. And one of the key ideas in this article about early life and pubertal stress, differentially modulating gray matter development, human adolescence, is that there are areas of the brain that are changed through early stress. And what the article is saying, and really it's being more and more established, because the fMRI studies are so much more advanced. What it's saying is that there are areas of the brain that are changed, and what it points to is that these brain areas are being matured more rapidly. What does that mean, being matured more rapidly? And this is really key, because it used to be, okay, so there is a loss of gray matter, in the hippocampus for trauma, in the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So this article was showing that what early stress, what early trauma will do, will change those areas, and matures it. And maturing is really key. And what that means, and what maturing means, is that the brain then adapts and readies itself to deal with the environment that is presented. Maturing means that the brain is prepared to deal with the environment that it is presented with and to deal well with it. And if that environment is stressful, traumatic, neglectful, violent, anxiety-ridden, if it's problematic, then the brain begins to say, oh, this is how I need to operate in order to efficiently survive in that environment. The problem is that the way that it does that is through pruning, right? Apoptosis, cell death, pruning. There are certain channels that are not relevant, and there are certain channels that are relevant. And in a stressful environment, the system becomes attuned to emotional, emotional processes and an emotional environment that is unnecessarily intense. And if you've studied with me, you know that we talk about the addiction to intensity here, and that addiction to intensity has everything to do with how the brain is shaped and formed. And that's a kind of pruning. And if you think of it, it's like if you have like a Christmas tree, a giant Christmas tree, and the Chevy, wasn't Chevy Chase in this last season had Christmas Vacation or something. They got this giant tree, right? And so in order to get the giant tree to fit into their smaller house, they had to cut it. They had to prune it. They had to cut it. And that's what the system does. It cuts off branches and branchings, dendrites, that are not relevant, so that the system, so that that tree, that network can fit into the environment, and it can match like a puzzle piece. So if the network is like this and the environment is like this, then it collapses, or it prunes that that network so that it fits just right into the environment. Makes sense, right? Except that that environment is an environment of chaos, of trauma, of stress, and the system will survive well in that, but it doesn't mean it will survive well overall. And that's really what it is. When we leave that environment, what ends up happening is we begin to apply that framework, that pattern, into all the other patterns. So instead of us growing our network, we actually prune the environment. That is, we reinforce. We go into an environment, a work environment, or whatever. We're behaving in a certain way. We're in a relationship, and we're behaving in a certain way, so that even if it was, say, a different shape, now by repeated exposure, we repeatedly reinforce that environment to be like the same environment, and thus there's a match. And it's this brain-environment interaction that is so key. And the three brain areas that are involved in that are the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. And the prefrontal cortex is really important. We know it's important for planning, for so-called executive function, and it is notoriously implicated for problems in coping. But in fact, it's more than that. That prefrontal cortex also has to do with, get this, it's not just the visual, orientation. So in organic intelligence, we land first orientation as connecting to the environment through the senses. So I've been a part of studies in interoception, sensation awareness, and I was saying in ISOMA, we need to have practice in working with all of those areas: image, sensation, orientation, meaning, and affect. And therapy primarily has asked people to be self-reflective and to go through the trauma story without regard really to the biological effects of that intervention. So in organic intelligence, We teach instead orientation as connecting to the environment through the senses. And that has an effect on the brain, and in particular on the prefrontal cortex. And this is recent research. Maybe next week we can look at this. But that orientation and the representation of the visual field in particular happens also in the prefrontal cortex. It's not just in the back and the visual cortex, it's prefrontal cortex. So this prefrontal cortex is key. Orientation is key because it is, and the way that we do it is just by allowing the eyes to go where they want to go. To allow the eyes to go where they want to go. And when we're able to do that, it's a different state because it's a state of exploration. It cues for and primes for states of curiosity, learning states, ventral vagal states, if you're a follower of the polyvagal theory. And those priming for those ventral vagal states means that my system can begin not to control the environment and recreate from another environment, the environment that is expected, but it actually can then relate to the environment as it is. Relate to the environment as it is. And that's a beginning of orientation. And we work long and hard to really establish that orientation well. And so the other two brain areas that are involved are the hippocampus. This area also, these are the same areas that are involved in what are called treatment-resistant depression, right? So the hippocampus is involved in memory and learning, right? So when we're talking about expectation, about relating to the environment, we're talking hippocampus, we're talking about memory and learning. Hippocampal volume and decreased hippocampal volume, that's a noted effect of chronic stress, chronic trauma. And then lastly, the amygdala, the smoke detector of the brain. So the smoke detector of the brain is this real key for assessing threat and the expectation also of threat. All right. So I am really great. Thanks, Gizem. Nice to see you. You caught the live stream, and luckily you caught the live stream because I didn't know how to get the live stream going, honestly. So we've got it laid out, and so we're going to be doing this more. This is just one article that I began to connect the dots for. I'll ping this article for you in case you're interested, and then wanted to share also. Part of this just gets at what is organic intelligence, and so it seems to me we should do something about that and help share a little bit about organic intelligence. So for that, on Tuesday, I'm going to do just a brief webinar, an hour, talking about what is organic intelligence. And thank you from Farmington, New Mexico. John, yeah, right. Thank you. Thanks for being in touch. We have a lot to talk about. Abraham, thank you for being in touch also. And I'm really glad to be a part of this process. Gypsy Fire, Gizem, thank you for being a part. And Asli, yep, you bet we're thinking about you there in Istanbul and in Turkey. Just to say, on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, my apologies to those of you who are in Europe, at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I'll do an hour-long webinar on what is organic intelligence, and I'll take your questions, and we'll just get it lined out a little bit for you. I'll continue to do these live events. I'm just checking my calendar now. Say again louder. Okay, so if you look on Facebook, on our Organic Intelligence Facebook page, you'll get more information on the Amber. Tried to put that link on there, but just look on our Facebook page, Organic Intelligence Facebook page, and then that free webinar will be up there. It'll be Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Also, you could go to organicintelligence.org and then sign up for our newsletter, and then I'll be sending an email out. Also, don't forget, we have clinical mindfulness. in organic intelligence. So if you Google clinical mindfulness, that's another free program that we offer. And then you get information also that way. That's another great way to begin to do this. In clinical mindfulness, I talk with experts on mindfulness because OI is a distinctly and religiously mindful approach, although we're obviously agnostic to and ecumenical in all of our supports. But clinical mindfulness is the free course. You can find it on our website, organicintelligence.org, and you can also get information. I'm heading from here into a conversation with those who are in the End of Trauma course. Likewise, it's on the organicintelligence.org. And I do free coaching for those folks once they've gotten through the End of Trauma course, and I'm looking forward to sharing there. So I'll look to see you here next week. We'll try it at the same time. I was just pulling up my calendar to see if that might work, and it looks like it will. So we'll look to get a similar meeting here, and I'm putting it in my calendar right now from 9 to 9:30. And I hope you can join me here. I'll have some more interesting things to talk about, and we'll look to begin to really connect the dots more. All right. Thank you so much for being a part in the game of life. Will do. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks all for joining. Looking forward to being with you next time. May all beings be well.